All right, welcome everybody. Just giving it a few seconds as everybody starts to join. We'll be beginning the webinar shortly. All right, still see everybody kind of filing in here. Welcome. All right, we will go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Boosting Group Activity with Cardio Programs on the Fitness Floor, sponsored by Matrix Fitness. Today's presenters are Eric Vahey and Jennifer Bolger, Strategic Account Managers for YMCAs and JCCs at Matrix. If you have any questions during their chat, please go ahead and send those through the Q&A section. We'll have time at the end to answer those. And so I'll go ahead and hand it on over. Eric and Jennifer, you have the floor.
Excellent, great. Thanks, Brittany, we appreciate it. All right, so like she said, my name is Jennifer Bolger. I am with Matrix Fitness, and I work mostly with YMCAs and JCCs out there, focusing on helping them be successful with their YMCA or with their Matrix equipment, really focusing on things like we're talking about today. And Eric is with me too. I'll let him say hello.
Hello, I'm Eric Vahey, and I'm also a strategic account manager with Matrix, and I am Jenny's counterpart. I'm in the eastern half of the country and really doing the same type of things. I'm just in a different geographic area.
Yeah, excellent. All right, well, we appreciate you joining us today. It's all about boosting group participation and activity programs, really leveraging the equipment you have on your fitness floor. So we see a great opportunity for people to engage together in exercise spaces. And we know that it's very effective for people's interest and activity level when they're involved with a group. They're willing to do more, their accountability goes up. And why don't we leverage the equipment that you have in your main fitness area for that purpose? Really, if you're doing that, there's so many long and short-term advantages, specifically for impacting the health and well-being of your members, but also the health and well-being of your bottom line. So that's what we're going to really talk about today, is introducing classes on the cardio floor for group training in greater and more visible spaces, rather than just always putting those programs back in your group training areas and the facilities. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. And we're going to be talking about why. Why would you do this? What's the value of providing more of a group training experience on your main cardio floor? And then once we've convinced you why it's a good thing to do, we'll talk about, well, how do you do this? How do you introduce a program like this successfully? Everything from training your trainers, how do you work with members on this, and getting in some of the specifics and the granularity of launching a successful program. And then we're going to share an example with you of the program that we have through Matrix Fitness called Sprint 8, that we have multiple models around delivering a program like this on your cardio floor. And so we're going to share that information with you as well. So you get a tangible example of what that might look like, and then we'll take your question and answers. So that's where we're going to go. So let's get into this. Let's talk about the why piece of this first. When you're considering leveraging the equipment on your main fitness floor, it's really about engagement, revenue generation, and retention without question. So when you think about the engagement side, you want to highlight a program for all to see, and you're doing this by showcasing it on the fitness floor. So what a great way to engage individuals, rather than having all of your group training programming take place away from your main fitness floor. When you run classes on your floor, it's incredibly visible to the people walking by in the space already. Those folks who tend to be very dedicated to, I just work out alone, get a chance to actually see that experience. And if you will, even kind of try it before you buy it, so to speak. That engagement opportunity of running program in a visible showcase area right on your floor is a great way to generate interest and gain participation in your programs. So engagement is key. Revenue generation, because members can see it. It's right on the fitness floor, and it's an opportunity for you to directly promote that program and give them a chance to experience what that would be like. If you even consider in your launch phase potentially providing a program like this at no cost initially to generate interest, that's a great way to boost revenue for your facility, and in an area of your facility that traditionally is value add, right? So it's generally access to all of your equipment on your main floor is included with your membership model. And we want to continue that and enhance that experience by offering one level above that for an experience for people to engage in a program together rather than just using that equipment as an individual. So it's a great way to boost revenue potential as well for you and your facility, while engaging your members in a group training experience, which we know directly leads to greater retention of participants in your facilities. So that's what we're looking for too. We know that your members that participate in your group activities, the research is very clear on this, it's been proven out multiple times. When they're engaged in a group and they're connected to other people in your facility, the retention of those individuals go up. And when you have new members, and what we typically see is members that are new to the facility, so 90 days or fewer, tend to be retained at the lowest rate. So attrition rates for people in the first 6 months, 3 to 6 months especially, but first 3 months of their membership tend to be the people that leave us at the highest rates. So we already know if we can get them connected to a group, the retention of those individuals goes up exponentially. So what a great way in a showcase location to engage your members in a group participation activity that helps keep them connected to you and your facility and the other members that are there, improving your retention, which improves the engagement experience, which improves the outcomes for those members, and which of course directly impacts the bottom line of your facility. So if we can get those folks to participate who are typically the I only exercise alone people into a group training experience, we're going to improve the retention of those people. So, and then having a trainer available on your wellness floor there to be able to approach members about participating in the class, maybe answering questions that they have, just generating buzz in general when they see a class happening and they're going to walk up to, if you have the ability to have maybe one trainer leading the class and another trainer to be there to answer questions or just to generate interest in the class, it's a great way to impact that overall retention and get people connected and generate leads potentially for you for even one-on-one training. So there's a lot of good reasons to participate in a program like this or create a program experience like this on your main fitness floor. You know, when you look at the equipment that you have out there, I already mentioned this, that so much of the equipment that you put on the floor is there for the use of your members at any time that your facility is open, which is great. So just having it there is what we would consider foundational. You're not going to have a health and well-being facility without a cardio equipment on a main floor available, people. So why not leverage that even further for better acquisition, for better retention, utilizing that equipment for more than just the individual exerciser. It's a ready-made social fitness experience. So the great thing about it is you don't need to create a whole new space or necessarily bring in new equipment. You have the equipment already. You have the space already. So let's leverage that and create more of a social fitness experience. We love to use that term, social fitnessing, where people can work out together, get an opportunity to be exposed to the programming that you have available, working with the trainer, being motivated to be consistent, having that accountability to be there at a certain time with other people. That's a great way to connect people together in a social setting. And you just are not going to get that at home. Even with all of the virtual training that's happening, where people are participating in either on demand or live classes from home, if you've done any of that, and you've also participated in a live class in person with other people, you know the experience is not the same. Even though you can see other people on video, that is not like if Eric and I were standing in front of you right now in a live room, it would be a different experience than you seeing us on your screen. So that is a great way, again, to leverage equipment that you have that's foundational for you. It's not going to cost you anything more to take advantage of that. We would really consider that a win-win opportunity. Participants get that accountability and connection with other people in a fun, exciting way to work out. Your trainers get an opportunity to to showcase what they can do and generate additional ways for them to supplement their income by offering small group training classes in this way rather than just one-on-one. And it's a great way for them to generate leads for one-on-one clients. So that's a win. The facility gets that engagement opportunity, more ways to engage your members. a way to drive revenue streams and improve the retention of the facility. So again, win, win, win. This is what we would like to see you do and experience and gain from running a program like this. So I'm optimistic at this point that compelled you enough to realize that running small group training classes on your wellness floor is a good thing to do. So now let's get into the specifics. Okay, you are convinced you want to do this. How do you do this? Well, here's what we would recommend. We would recommend that when you begin to run classes on your floor, you integrate this type of group training approach into the culture of your facility. And what I mean by that is there's a buzz around it. All staff talk about it, especially those staff that are working on your main cardio floor, but also your membership sales people are talking about this. Your group exercise instructors are talking about this. You're inviting people to try the class. So it's not just one thing that's promoted on a flyer just in the main cardio space. People are going to see it everywhere that they go. So they're going to see it in your social media. They're going to see it on your website. They're going to see it in your bathroom stall advertising. They're going to hear about it from your membership staff. You're going to hear about it from the staff working on the main floor, from your personal trainers, from your group exercise instructors. So it's something that's pervasive throughout the facility. We'd also encourage you to introduce this class to potential members. When you're talking to people who are interested in joining your facility and you're taking them around and identifying what they're interested in doing, especially for those folks who might say, you know, I just like to work out alone, I'm just going to use the equipment floor. That's a great way to say, excellent. And, you know, we have a wonderful opportunity with our group programming class that takes place on the cardio floor. A lot of our members really enjoy participating in that. It's a way to connect with other people while still sort of working out alone on your own piece of equipment, but with other people together, work a little bit harder, motivate each other. So introduce it on the tour. Talk to your prospective members about it right away. If there's a class going on during a prospective tour, even better, stop there for a minute. Showcase the class, talk to that prospective member about this is the kind of engagement and programming experiences that we offer as for members of our facility. So that's something we would encourage you to do. When you think about new member onboarding, so you probably have something already laid out now. You probably have a 90-day onboarding strategy for your new members. You most likely have some kind of a process to connect them to a get started program, or start with fit and healthy, or whatever kind of fun little vernacular you have for the name of that program. You probably have some way to onboard new members into your main fitness area space. We would encourage you to incorporate this class into that onboarding experience. Perhaps that onboarding experience becomes a chance to try the class. It's a demo experience for a class for people, and you do that with a group. Maybe it's just something that you lay out as, here's one of the things we would encourage you to do. Let me show you the schedule. Here's when the class takes place and the times and days that's available. But make sure that whoever is doing those onboarding appointments for new members, or that free personal training session, maybe to get that one free session kind of thing, that those personal trainers or those wellness staff are talking about this class experience, and they're all doing it consistently as part of what you cover during that new member onboarding appointment. That's something that we would encourage you to do for sure. Think about maybe holding informational clinics around this. So one of the things we've seen be really successful, and Eric's going to talk about this more related to the Sprint 8 model, but you schedule maybe at the beginning of the month, or another time to do this might be like right at the end of the month, because people like to start new things on Mondays. They like to start new things the first week of the month. So if you hold these informational clinics, maybe the last week or the last 2 weeks of the month, it's a way to give them a chance to hear about why you're running this program, what they can get from it. Maybe take them to the floor and give them a little taste of what a group class would be. Introduce them to the other participants that are participating in the instructional clinic. And now those people might sign up together and come to the class together as well, and offer those informational clinics at multiple times of the day. So you're going to have a different audience in the morning that you'd have in the after work crowd, maybe different on the weekends. So offer those kind of peppered throughout your marketing week around this for different times to cater to different participants who might participate in that class. And we would also encourage you to have that closing question as part of that instructional clinic. So at the end of that, not saying, would you like to sign up today, but like say, all right, follow me to the membership desk and let's get you registered for this class. That kind of buy-in or opt-out language, right? We're not asking if they want to, we're saying, let's get going, who's with me, kind of thing for getting started with the class. We would also encourage you to consider setting up a zone to differentiate the class, something that kind of calls out the space, makes it interesting, generates questions, but also to block out equipment, obviously, for the class. We don't want to monopolize it for a long period of time. We want to take away from the value that you have for equipment on the floor. But we do want to let people know this area is used for our group training classes. Post them visibly when those classes are going to take place. Maybe just prior to the class, you put up line stanchions to block out the space. And maybe you're using those screens. If you have touch screens on your consoles, for example, like we do with Matrix, you could have one of your welcome screen images on that console be promoting the class, or change it right before the class takes place, half an hour before, to say, hey, this unit's going to be used for class starting at 1 o'clock today, or that type of thing. So make sure that you are differentiating that zone and also clearly communicating the class times of when that class is going to take place and what that will look like, how long that equipment will potentially be utilized as well, so people are aware of that. And then utilize your traditional and digital media to including boots on the ground for your marketing efforts. So traditional media, I mentioned this already. So your website, your social media pages, create some buzz. If you've got some influencers in your facility, have them take the class, give them a chance to talk about it and promote it. And in fact, when I talked about that culture piece and incorporating this throughout the culture, I would encourage you to run classes for your staff. Give them a chance to experience the class, especially your membership sales people, your personal trainers. Give them a chance to try the class as well. So it's so much easier and compelling to sell a program when you've experienced it yourself. You can certainly give them the talking points to share with members about it, but when they've had a personal experience, you can just hear the enthusiasm come through in their voice. So we would definitely encourage that as part of what you're looking at for how you launch a program like this, incorporating it into your overall culture for that piece. So that's kind of looking at the how. Let's look at really more of a timeline around that how. So when you're considering when you're going to launch a program, fall is a great time to launch new programs traditionally, and I anticipate this year, despite the pandemic, is no different. So right now, school's starting to get back in session for a lot of people. Their free time has become more available to get engaged in their own health and well-being than maybe during the summer when things are a little bit crazy and vacations and that kind of thing happening. So consider first when you want to launch a program like this, and then build a timeline to help prepare you and move forward with the launch of the class. So it's not just picking a day and then launching it. There's planning that goes involved in this. And one of the things that's really important when you're planning a program like this is deciding what's the business model going to be behind this program. Are you going to offer this as a program that runs for a set period of time? Like, for example, in the Sprint example we're going to share, it's an 8-week program. And we would encourage you to run that 3 times a week. So is it that kind of thing? Are you going to do it where you're selling it as a program that they purchase once, but they participate in multiple times a week for a set period of time, 1 month, 2 months, something like that? Are you going to consider offering it as a drop-in model? And maybe it's included as a value add. So you're going to run group training classes. You're not going to do it as a fee-based program. It's going to be included in membership, and members can drop into the class. Even if you have your reservation tool in place, they will reserve their spot, but they can participate in that class at any time. They don't need to commit to it for a period of time. Maybe you're going to do it as part of a subscription model. We've seen a lot of this happening over the last several years, where you're, rather than purchasing like a punch card or a series of sessions, let's say, for example, with personal training, instead you're paying an additional monthly subscription model on top of your membership. And included in that would be access to programs like this. Maybe it's unlimited access to all the small group training classes that you offer, but it costs you an additional monthly subscription. You get the unlimited access. Whether you participate in the classes or not doesn't matter. There's no accounting accrual that has to take place from this. So again, whatever you're considering for the business model, that needs to be the first step. Determine what this class is going to look like in your operational model. Once that happens, now you're getting on to staff education. You want to, that we were talking about incorporating it into that culture across all departments. That starts after you've decided how the program is going to run and what it's going to look like, so that you're educating your staff. And I'm not just talking about the people who'll be leading the class. I'm talking about everybody in the facility so they know about it. Definitely remember to include those Welcome Center membership staff, the people that are the ambassadors of your facility, the ones who can make or break a program when a person walks up and says, hey, I heard about this group training cardio class that you're doing. We don't want the Welcome Center staff or the front desk staff person to say, I've never heard of that. I don't think we offer that here. So make sure that you are educating folks and maybe even giving them a chance to try it, like I mentioned before. Then it's about recruiting your trainers, the people who are going to lead this class. Keep in mind, as you're recruiting people to participate who'll be leading this class, the traditional one-on-one personal trainer might be a great fit. But on the other hand, that transition from one-on-one training to more of a group training experience takes a different skill set than what you do for traditional personal training. So personal trainers can be a great fit for leading a class like this, and you need to find the right one. I'll transition over on the other side. If you look at a group exercise instructor, group exercise instructors know how to lead a group and cue. However, leading a class of 30 people is totally different than leading a small group training program of maybe 8 people. So consider who are the right trainers who have the right personality and the skill set to train this way. They're going to need some practice if they haven't done this before either. So maybe a chance to practice with each other, teach classes for the other staff, get to feel for how they're going to do this, how they're going to lead it, how much technical instruction, that type of thing. So recruiting the trainers. When you look at the marketing piece, you can see that is running, our recommendation is that's running throughout the timeline. So once you got to get the planning phase first, but then get your marketing materials out and start pushing it out there with your digital marketing, with your traditional marketing, with your boots on the ground communication marketing around this program. That's going to be ongoing from the pre-launch through the launch, ongoing after that, and most likely you're going to keep this program going. So that marketing is just going to be pervasive, keep going throughout. Equipment installation, this is most likely a program you're not going to need to install special equipment for because you already have equipment, unless you're going to maybe enhance it. Maybe you're going to do a small group training program using your cardio equipment, where the first 20 or 30 minutes of the class is on the cardio equipment, but then maybe you're doing some technical training on the floor with personal training or mobility training. So if you need special equipment for those exercise experiences, this would be the time to make sure that you have that before you launch the program. Training for the staff, I'm going to spend a lot more time on that in just a minute. Having that period of time where you have demos, where you may be running those instructional clinics, where you're getting people registered for the program, that opportunity to try before they buy and get them signed up. And then you're launching the program. The program is running, you're promoting what's happening there, you're talking about it on your Twitter feed, you're posting pictures on your Instagram feed, and then there's some kind of results review around this. It can be anything from just that engagement opportunity to connect with other members to maybe you're doing some pre and post actual physical fitness testing, depending on what that looks like. But also it's the operational results, right? So how successful was this program? What was our goal from the business model? How well did we meet that or exceed that? How are we going to tweak and change this for the next round of the program? So that launch timeline for how you're going to get this up and running. So as part of that launch timeline, we have that recruiting trainers and then the training experience. So when you're training the trainers, and start with the why. It's all the things we've already talked about. So engagement, revenue, retention. It's also, though, answering proactively any questions or concerns they might have about how a program like this would impact what they offer in the group training space for traditional group exercise, or in the personal training space for one-on-one traditional personal training. We want them to recognize this is an opportunity for them to grow what they do, not compete with what they already do. And so part of that is building empathy with the trainer who's going to lead a class like this. So we know a lot of times people who work in the health and wellness fitness industry are not necessarily uncomfortable with exercise. They're really comfortable coming into a space. They're not intimidated by equipment, but give them a chance to experience a class. Think about it from the perspective of the participant who will be joining this class. give them a chance to really develop that empathy muscle and build that up. And a great way for them to do that is have you run those practice classes with other staff in the facility. Staff are not necessarily traditionally fitness individuals. That's another way for the trainers to work with an audience that's going to be very similar to the audience that they'll have in the class itself, and a great way for them to understand what objections people have, what questions come up, what things they like more than other things, so that they can really fine tune and tweak that class experience to best align with the people that you're going to be targeting to join the class. So when it comes to practicing training, one of the things that those instructors will want to do is, how do you actually coach in a small group training session? So it's different how you verbally cue, you know, that whole verbal and nonverbal communication. If you're someone who's been traditionally a personal trainer doing one-on-one training, generally probably your voice inflections, your tone, your volume are on the lower side, right? Kind of on that 1 to 10 scale. You probably talk to your one-on-one client, but your tone, inflection, volume is kind of down at the 2 level. If you're someone who's a group exercise instructor, used to teaching classes for 30 or 40 people at a time, you have what I call your group exercise voice. You know, the volume is loud, the inflection is very pronounced, your tone is enthusiastic and exciting, which is awesome. That's absolutely what we want, but maybe not at a 10, you know, maybe down at like a 5 level. So we need those one-on-one trainers to bring their motivational verbal and nonverbal skills up to like a 5, and those group group instructors bringing it from a 10 down to a 5. So kind of balancing that out and practicing how that's done. Language matters as well when you're teaching classes like this and you're teaching them how to coach. So we want to use language like bring it home or push to the end, rather than things like you're almost there, you know, when you're not really almost there. We already know that those trainers are lying to us. Now you've just proved it. So it's practicing what type of cues and the verbal and nonverbal communication, that's going to be important. Same thing on the technical instruction side. So typically in a one-on-one training session, you're going to give a lot of technical instruction. You're going to demonstrate how to do things. You're going to make a lot of corrections. You might even physically move people as they're going through an exercise or spotting them. You're not going to be able to give that same kind of high-level technical instruction in a group training, small group training environment. On the flip side, a group exercise instructor, they're not able to give quite as much specific individual technical instruction. They tend to give cues that are for the whole class when they're talking. So it's practicing how do you modify that technical instruction, where personal trainers would be doing a little bit less individual technical instruction, where a group exercise instructor gets to do a little bit more than what they're used to. So practicing that is going to be a great experience for your trainers to feel comfortable with that, and getting them to work with each other and other staff is a wonderful way to do that. And then it's just some of the game day logistics to get you launched, right? So having your trainers know what they need to do if they have any responsibility around reserving the space, readying equipment, setting up like those stanchions that I talked about, putting signs up just prior to the class taking place, walking around and communicating people that, hey, this treadmill is going to be available until X time, and then we're going to be utilizing it for a class for half an hour. Like, what role are your trainers going to be responsible for in that kind of launch or game when the class is actually happening? Make sure they're clear about that. And then another thing that you want to do in a group training experience is teach your instructors how to sync up all participants. So when you're doing workouts on cardio equipment, where you're anticipating that the class is going to be doing this as a group, you're going to want to sync up that equipment so people are doing whatever it is you're cueing at the same time. So that's going to take some practice too, because you're going to have some of those people who get there early for class and some people who breeze in and show up like seconds before the class starts. So if they've already started the unit, how do you pause? Maybe get other people to catch up with them, you know, those types of things, so that you can sync up the class, because it's a totally different experience on cardio equipment if you're not all in sync when you're trying to do a synced class. So that's something to practice as well as you're considering how to launch and train your trainers. And now we're going to get into how do you work with members in this space. I'm going to turn that over to Eric to talk about. Eric?
All right. Let me pull this up.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing.
All right. So let's dive into working with members and just some of the kind of dive in a little bit deeper on some of the things that Jenny was talking about there. So we want to try and teach members just the reasoning behind the movements and things that we're doing. You know, what are we doing on the fitness center floor? What is this piece of cardio equipment? I think a lot of times you'll have people that are going to start doing these classes or teach these classes. They may gravitate toward pieces of equipment that they're more familiar with. And I would encourage you to do classes with things like the recumbent bike or ascent trainers, ellipticals. Things don't always go, the treadmill is the number one thing that people always want to go to. And you don't necessarily have to do that. And it also gives you a great space to be able to help train those members and tell them about why you're choosing other pieces of cardio equipment. And that might just be logistically because those things are more readily available in the fitness center, and it can make some of that traffic management happen a little easier and better. When you start these classes, it can be a little bit like herding cats. And, you know, like Jenny said, if you're a personal trainer, that you might need to bring it up to 5. If you're a group exercise instructor, you might need to bring it down from 10 to 5. But you definitely want to capture people's attention. You're going to have people showing up sometimes at different times. You've got the person that shows up 5 or 10 minutes early. They want to get on a piece of equipment and start warming up. You've got the person that shows up 1 minute before class is scheduled to begin. They don't have their shoes on. They don't have their socks on. They still need to fill their water bottle. And then you have the person that comes running in the middle of your warm up and wants to start. So you want to be prepared for those situations because they definitely happen. It's inevitable. And it can be like herding cats doing some of these classes, especially when they're on the fitness center floor, because you don't have a set room or a space that you're going to do that. And so by identifying some equipment, whether it's on the cardio streams themselves, like Jenny talked about, or the stanchions, I've seen logos on the floor, rugs on the floor, just to make it a space so that people know this is where I'm coming. This is where we're going to spend the next 30 minutes, 45 minutes, hour, whatever it might be. And then, you know, they can know that once they're in that space, then you're the person that's instructing them. And it just helps the logistics and working with them a little better and sometimes easier to capture their attention. So when working, you know, interaction, not interruption. So there's no need to coach during the entire time that you're, especially if you're doing things with intervals. You know, intervals are certainly a popular piece or component of these classes, and there's no need to coach the entire time that interval is going on. Sometimes, like Jenny mentioned, using words like bring it home or push to the end, those are much things that are better to serve you than, you know, saying that you're almost there. It just helps people really move past the exercise paradox. You know, and that exercise paradox is your mind is wanting you to do the simplest thing possible. And so when you're giving the mind an excuse to give up, it will definitely do it. And so, you know, people are going to battle this exercise paradox when they come to these classes at times. And so making sure that you're using the right cues can really help them work through that. And I think that's also one of the benefits of these classes is a lot of times, you know, that exercise paradox also is saying to you, hey, it's easier to just sit at home on the couch today than it would be to show up in the fitness center. And a lot of times people are coming to these classes because they want that accountability toward other people. And it really helps them defeat that exercise paradox and keeping them coming in to these classes and keeping attendance high. And you know, you'd be surprised that people are willing to pay for something that they could do on their own for free. And so we've seen a number of these classes around the country that they're doing just programs that are on the console of that particular piece of equipment that people could come in and they could do on their own. And they're coming in and they're doing it in groups. And sometimes they're paying to do those things together in groups. And there's a lot of power behind that, and don't discard that, because, you know, you can start using the cardio equipment to get some return on investment, or to start developing some program revenue because of that, because people are willing to come in and they're willing to work out in groups. So don't underestimate the power of social fitness when it comes to that. So a little bit more on just working with members. So come up, like a lot of times coming up with some sort of metrics that you're tracking during the class can help to progress people through the class, keep them coming back session after session or class after class. You might have a session of 8 classes or something like that. So, a lot of times this is done METs, watts, heart rate, calories. They can be great metrics, but also things like perceived exertion. I think that that's something that gets lost sometimes, and if you're on a level 10 of a recumbent bike and you're pedaling as fast as you can, and you're noting, how do I feel when I'm doing that? And if that starts to get easier at that level, that's progress. And so we've seen where you can get all these sophisticated tracking metrics, and that's great. If that's what's going to work in your facility, do that, because it helps to progress people. And then, but also if if those type of things aren't a reality or don't have the resources for those things, simply things like perceived exertion are going to be, it can be something that's easily tracked within that person themselves, and doesn't take a lot of pen and paper or digital tools to be able to do that. Keep in mind, and especially when I talk about these, going to the treadmill to be the first thing that, sometimes people do these classes around, trekking classes, for example, had been popular for a while, and people don't always know their top speed on a treadmill. And there's a lot of YouTube channels dedicated to folks that didn't know their top speed on a treadmill, right? They've coming off the back of those treadmills. And so, those are things that when you're doing these classes, keep those things in mind. So you might be mixing up, you might have some treadmills, some recumbent bikes, some ellipticals available for people. Maybe they're upright bikes. People are used to doing classes on indoor cycles, right? They're in a room typically when they're doing that. And you may have some of those that are on the fitness center floor, or you might be intermingling in with your the other pieces of equipment that you're offering in that class. But definitely have some sort of way that you're progressing people through. And sometimes, of course, the traditional things have been a body weight and circumference measurements and things like that. But also, metrics about how are you feeling? It can really be impactful, and sometimes more impactful than losing weight or something like that might be. So some of the logistics on these classes, when people are coming into hopefully this zone type of area that you've created, that you're going to want to warm up together. It doesn't necessarily matter when someone comes into class. So if class is going to start at 3 o'clock and you're having people show up at 2:50, you might want to be there early. You may have to do some logistics of getting people on and off equipment based on the things that you want to use in the zone. You might have people that come in and start warming up. Just have them come in and start warming up. And then based on what type of equipment that you're using, you would be using a pause button, or everybody would stop together and then start at the same time. If you're using some sort of timed intervals, I'll give you a sense of what that looks like when I talk about Sprint 8 here in a second. And then also just some things to keep in mind too, is that we've seen that there's been participation with men in these classes that are on the fitness center floor, whereas we don't necessarily see that same type of participation in traditional group exercise classes that might be done in a room or something like that. And so, this can be a way to not only utilize your fitness center more and get some programming done inside of there, but also interacting with different groups or populations that you might not have been able to reach in traditional group exercise classes in the past, or even group training classes. We've even seen some men transition over from one-on-one personal training to doing more in a group setting, just because of that power of social fitness. So things to keep in mind. All right, so I'm going to go through just really kind of a specific example that we've seen, and Jenny and I have taught about it in different webinars in the past. And so you might, other examples that are out there, I mentioned trekking, you're certainly familiar with Orange Theory and different concepts like that. Those are kind of group concepts that have worked on fitness center floors before. We have one on our consoles called Sprint 8, and the Sprint 8 is a program that's built into our consoles. It's designed to do 3 times a week for 12 weeks. Sprint 8 really can be done on any equipment. It doesn't necessarily have to be matrix equipment. The advantage there is that the timing for this program is all built into the console. but you can do Sprint 8 on really any equipment. I've seen it done outdoors. I've seen it in fourth grade classrooms. I've seen it in camps, after school programs with kids. I've seen it with adults, with seniors, everybody in between. And so really, Sprint 8 is a high intensity interval training program. It's designed to do a 3-minute warm up, and then you go and that warm up can be really as long as you need to be, but you go through a 3-minute warm up, and then you do 30 seconds at what I like to call your escape a bear speed. Everybody has a different escape a bear speed. It's just what is that high level, high intensity sprint for you. And that might be on a treadmill, that could be on a recumbent bike, an elliptical machine. So you do that 30-second all out intense interval, and then you go through a 90-second active recovery period. And then you'll repeat that 8 times, and then go through a little 2.5-minute cool down at the end for a total of 20 minutes. And this program was developed by a guy named Phil Campbell. Phil's somebody that we've partnered with, and he's been in the industry a long time. He's been a hospital administrator. He's worked with athletes going into the combine and different athletes training for track and field and sprinting. And this whole program really all came about with Phil back in the early 1970s, and him training for what he calls the Turkey Bowl. He was played high school football. He would get together every year with some of his buddies, and they would play in a Turkey Bowl. And so he would get in shape for this Turkey Bowl. And just like any of us that might be trying to get in shape for something like that, he would go out and run long distance, slow cardio, just to try and get the miles in, to try and get in shape for the Turkey Bowl. And one year he just decided that he was going to start doing more sprint training about 30 days before this event, and was kind of amazed at the way his body changed doing the sprint training before that. And so he just said, what if I just kept doing this training throughout the rest of the year? And Phil ends up writing a white paper on the research that was out there. The white paper turned into a book, and the next thing you know, we're doing Sprint 8 classes in fitness centers around the country. And so Sprint 8 is really kind of designed on this concept of sprint cardio, where your basic, have a little pyramid there. You have your basic level of activity, right? Activities of daily living. And then the next step above that might be traditional cardio, the folks that you see in the fitness center, riding a bike, reading a book. And then the next level up from that might be high intensity interval training. Certainly plenty of those classes that are out there these days. And then the next level above that is really sprint training and sprint intensity training. And kind of the difference between sprint intensity training and high intensity interval is that in sprint intensity training, you really typically need a longer rest interval between those sprints. High intensity interval classes, like HIIT classes, typically will have a shorter interval between your work interval. So like the rest interval is typically shorter, and you don't get as much rest, and then you go and do your next interval. Whereas in sprint training and that sprint intensity, we want you to be able to do your max effort each time. So that's why you've got that 90-second recovery, because we're really trying to recover at the cellular level. And there's a lot of science to go through, and Jenny and I we teach a 3-hour course on that. So I'm not going to go too deep into what that is today, but just to know that training at that high intensity can be really beneficial for you. And we've had a lot of results come from that. And so you'll see that on our equipment, that tracking metric that we talked about, we use something called a sweat score. And that sweat score is really just a measure of joules of energy that you're creating when you're on that interval and through that full 20-minute program. And we found that that sweat score is something that really can progress with time. And you're going to get the other results that come from it if you're tracking your sweat score. So we've seen reduced body fat, we've seen reduced improvements in blood lipids, we've seen people feel better, typically all of these things that people want, the results that they want to get. We found that by just pushing this metric along, the sweat score, that people are able to get those results and see those results. It's also something that we can prescribe when people aren't working with us in the class. I could have Jenny and say, hey, you're not working in class this week. I want you to come in, do the elliptical machine, and I want you to get an average sweat score of 130. And she would know, okay, here's what I have to do in order to be able to hit that for me. So it's something that we can prescribe. So some examples of where this has been done in the community, the YMCA of Greater Tulsa is a great example of this. They've been doing these classes for quite some time now, really since January of 2018. And their classes, it's a 60-minute class. They do 20 minutes of Sprint 8, because that's the length of how long a Sprint 8 program is. And then they'll do 30 minutes of strength and then 10 minutes of mobility for that full 60-minute class. And they do those 3 times a week for 8 weeks. And then they will keep those classes going, you know, in those program sessions, those 8-week sessions, they'll keep those going year round. And they're currently charging $240 for members for that class, and then $300 for non-members. And really what they've found is that they do instructional clinics, like Jenny mentioned, kind of at the end of the month when they're going to be beginning their next program session of the class. And they found that those classes that they're teaching, those clinics, are really key to getting people signed up, because they will give them information about the science, the research, the why, you know, you would want to do this type of class on the fitness center floor. They give them that information at that clinic. They teach them about what the sweat score is. They can take them through a couple rounds so they get an idea of what kind of sprint intensity looks like that they're going to be doing in that particular class. And then they get them signed up, and they've been able to get some great results from that I'll show you here in a second. But some other programs that we've seen out there that you might be familiar with are able to kind of model off of. Certainly Orange Theory is one. These row houses or rowing programs that are out there, those are other things that have worked well on fitness center floors. We certainly, you know, you're certainly familiar with indoor cycling and doing that in more of a room setting, but trying to incorporate and just get creative with some of the cardio that you might have available to you on your fitness center floor. And a lot of times it's the things that don't get used as often. Sometimes that can be some of the most popular classes, just because people are getting bored with what they've traditionally been doing themselves. So we can help certainly create that differentiation on the fitness center floor. I mean, that's something that Jenny and I really try and do with the Ys and JCCs that we work with around the country, is to just try and help them understand what this concept could be and how they can get some return on investment for the equipment that they have in their fitness center. But we definitely recommend doing things like it could be as fancy as floor decals. The one I like the best are these rugs. You know, think of the big rugs that are in the entryway of like the grocery store, something like that. And then I've seen program logos on it. We have Sprint 8 logoed rugs, but it literally could be anything. And the cool thing about the rugs is you can roll them out, roll them up, and that zone, so to say, becomes flexible, right? You can change different equipment around. It's not permanent. You know, you might need 2 rugs for one class, maybe just 1 rug for a different class. It all just depends. But do some sort of signage, rope walkways, something to draw some attention, because you kind of want that from a marketing standpoint. And what I've seen in these classes is people will ask you what is going on. And so if you've got the resources, you know, if you're teaching a class, it's always good to have somebody else just kind of floating around the fitness center, one, just kind of helping you to keep people off certain equipment that you might want to be using for class, but also just to answer questions. I mean, there's been times when in teaching these classes where people will come up and ask you what you're doing, and you're like, I'm in the middle of a class, I'm trying to get through this, you know, and they might just want to know and be curious. And that's how these classes grow. And I think that's a cool thing, you know, and other members in your facility see this kind of excitement go on, because it makes noise, and it gets people's attention when they're in there. So, you know, on our equipment, this is a pre-programmed workout. You might have pre-programmed workouts on some of your cardio equipment that's in there. Dive into those things and see if that's something that you can organize a class around. And then, you know, we really try and focus on member engagement and working with people, and not necessarily just planning out, you know, what we're going to do each and every session. You know, we try and keep it to where we're trying to focus on that member experience. And it's a great way to expose people to new pieces of equipment that they haven't done. So if you know, don't necessarily have to jump right on those treadmills. So some success stories that have been out there that we've had and seen. Lynn Henderson was doing Sprint 8 at the Tulsa YMCA, and you can see she started right from the beginning in January of 2018 when they were doing these things. And after 3 rounds, so figure 24 weeks, she lost 6 inches from her waist, 13% circumference from her abdomen, 4 inches from her thigh. She reduced her hip circumference by 8%, reduced her upper arm circumference by 19%. And then to me, one of the most impactful ones is that she was able to stop taking high blood pressure medication and was able to get off that medication, which is huge. And that's, I think those are things that people are certainly wanting to do and why they get into exercising. And then another story for you, Louise Smith, she was doing Sprint 8. Yes, she's 88 years young and was doing sprint intensity training. Just like I said, everybody has a different escape of bear speed. I can imagine that your escape of bear speed may be a little quicker than Louise, but she still has an escape of bear speed. And for her, it was more about, I can breathe better, I've got better stamina. Her cardiologist actually recommended that she do Sprint 8, even though she has a pacemaker. So this type of intensity can be for everyone. We've seen it from 88 years young in Louise to 4th graders in classes. And it's a great way to get other types of demographics. I mentioned men earlier. Whatever those demographics are in your facility can be a great way to get different demographics into these classes and programming on your floor that maybe wouldn't come to group exercise classes. Other things that we've seen and ways to do this programming out on the floor are just member challenges. Sometimes these member challenges are done together, right? During the pandemic, there were some that were done virtual, and whatever works for you. Maybe it's a bit combination of both. Maybe they do 2 kind of virtual days on their own and they get together in the fitness center 1 day a week and do things together, compare results, that kind of stuff. But we were doing these challenges with Sprint 8, and people were coming in and doing Sprint 8 together 3 times a week. We've seen this in YMCAs, JCCs, universities, colleges, as they seem to do really well with the Sprint 8 challenges as well. So you might have and incorporate this into a challenge that you're doing at the facility and kind of picking through what metrics might be good for you to track and to move people along. So with that, I think we'll take a stop here and just kind of see if we had any questions about the material that we went through.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric and Jennifer. That's an excellent presentation. I love those success stories, and I think that's awesome. Let's see. It looks like there are currently no questions in the Q&A. Kind of checked the chat feature as well. So in case anybody has any last second questions, was there anything, Eric and Jennifer, that you all wanted to add or end with?
No, I mean, really just appreciate the time that you spent with us, and would encourage you to, try something new on your fitness center floor using equipment that's going to be there. And, that to me, that equipment is a commodity. You have to have it in the fitness center, right? And how do you take that equipment from being a commodity into something that's more desirable that you can program with and maybe get some return on investment, be it membership, retention, revenue, those things that Jenny was talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just add to that, Brittany, too, that, if you have Matrix out there and you're looking for some help and support around ideas to launch programming like this, please reach out to Eric and myself. We'd be happy to help you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you all, and thank you attendees. We will have this webinar available on demand within the next couple of days. You'll also be sent a copy, but just in case you want to revisit or share with friends, that will be available to you. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you again, Eric and Jennifer, and everybody have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.